Alrighty. Good evening. Looks like camera's coming through good. I see the audio bar moving around, making noise. Sweet. Everything seems to be working. How is everybody doing this evening? Hope you guys are well. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Oh, yeah. I should have poured myself another beer before we got started. Oh well, I have water. So yeah, this evening I wanted to continue the saga of the game dev world building episodes that I've been doing on stream. This is going to be the third one. And if this is your first time hanging out for one of these, I am concepting a space game. And concepting and designing, and then hoping to have it developed, whether I learn to do it myself or right now the plan is to develop a really good concept and then pitch it to a developer, an indie studio. I'm working on a prologue, sort of concepting all the core game mechanics and how they work together. Building out the lore for the universe. That tonight we're looking at the timeline that I've been working on. Nearly have it. I've got it nearly caught up with the sort of present day in the universe, but didn't get as much done today as I wanted to. So probably have another. I did it in Google Slides, and so there's 6. I'm halfway through slide 6, and there's probably going to be 8 by the time I'm done, because I have a couple more things that I have to tie in there. But if you've watched any of my other content, I'm a big fan of lore and narrative, and I'm a big fan of Star Citizen lore and narrative work, and I'm a big believer that lore equals gameplay, and so good lore informs the gameplay and the gameplay mechanics, and having a narrative lore reason behind things helps the player feel more immersed in the environment and engaged in the game that they're playing. And so this all started out as a book idea that I wanted to write, and then I realized when I was thinking about it in my head and making notes and such, that a lot of the ideas that I had would work really well in the form of a space game, incorporating a lot of features and game mechanics from games that I've really liked over the years. Star Citizen is my main game, but I've always been very much a strategy and tactical gamer. At heart, as much as I love Star Citizen, I'm really not a huge FPS guy. And so I've always loved tactical games. I love the XCOM series. I love RTS games. So the idea behind this game is very much inspired by XCOM, Star Wars Empire at War. Oh gosh, I just brain farted, having a stroke. But the key mechanics, but it also has some almost FTL influence in that there is a roguelike mechanic, roguelike or roguelite mechanic. Hey, Brees Arena, good to see you. RTS, TBS, turn-based strategy. Is that what you mean by TBS? Yeah, I'm a huge fan of those. I've been, my laptop that I take with me to work is Streakin'. Thanks for coming and hanging out, Danger Oboe. My laptop that I take to work with me. I usually use it for work things, but when I have downtime there, I'll watch YouTube videos, but I've been using it to do a lot of writing recently. But it runs Rogue Trader. I've been playing Jagged Alliance. Those are games that I really enjoy, and I really enjoy XCOM. And oh gosh, what's the other game that's like XCOM? I forget the name of it. and so there's these core mechanics that really shape the game, that tie in really well to the story that I'm developing. But yeah, so if you haven't seen the previous segments, they're up on my YouTube, 1 and 2. And basically, you did a whole lot of looking at, I read some of the prologue that I'd been writing. Phoenix Point, that is another really good one. Thank you for Phoenix Point isn't the one I'm thinking of, but that is Phoenix Point is a really good game. I enjoyed that one. But yeah. So let's go ahead and we'll just switch screens and we'll get right into the timeline. And we're just going to read through the timeline, and we'll talk about some of the key points in time and how they are related to the gameplay, how they sort of ground you in the universe. But if you find this interesting, I would love it if you check out the other videos on my YouTube. I'd love to hear your feedback, especially if you want to hop in my Discord. There's a game dev section where I've been talking about this. I've got a artist who's working with me on the concept art for the AMS Alliance Marine ship, Nassau, which is your hero ship in the game. Like all the things that I'm working on are pinned in the game dev section in my Discord. So if you want to read them, if you want to check it out, feel free to open up the links and leave me some comments. And I'm still working on coming up with a name for our alien antagonist in this game. It isn't solely humans. Where there is other intelligent life, other spacefaring species. Not a lot of them. A total of 4, including humanity. But I'm still trying to figure out a good name that fits with the aliens that I am developing. And I talked more about those in episode 2. So if you want to learn more about them, check out that episode 2. Kurthak. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and switch screens, and that way you guys can see the slideshow. Is it the first page? Yep. Okay, cool. You know what's really weird is every time I do the transition, it always like shows the next scene for a split second, then shows the transition, then goes to the next scene. And I don't know how to fix that. I wonder if I do it based on frame. Huh. Okay, well, I can play around with that later. Anyway, so here is the timeline, and this is the sort of theme that I created. So this image in the background is concept art for a star map from an artist that I found on the web, and I can share the link in chat. Let's see, just because I thought it was really cool looking, and I'm a big fan of Homeworld, and so the map is sort of based off of Homeworld. I'm going to drop that link really quick. Oop, did that not? There we go. So that's the link to the artist, and you can see their work there. And I'm also taking a look at a few things because I want to see about making my own star map in order to give a visual representation of the lore and the universe, at least an idea, a concept. Like none of this is rigid. It's all subject to change, but you'll get the idea of what I'm going for as we go through this. So this timeline, this universe is set in humanity's future, and currently I think that it's probably the current day is going to be in the sort of late 2400s, I would say, so the 25th century. And I started the timeline basically back, when spaceflight first happened for humanity. So 1961, Humanity's first manned spaceflight. Yuri Gagarin of the Soviet Union becomes the first human in space during his flight aboard the Vostok 1 on April 1st, 1961. Oh, I remember what I was going to do. Let's see. We're going to play a little music too, and bear with me for just a second. Wait, link. And we will mute this for 1 second. And I want sorry. There we go. A little bit of chill music to talk some lore to. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. How's the volume on the music for you guys? Not too loud? Oh, there we go. How's the volume on the music? Is that not too loud? Went on April Fool's Day. Oh, yeah. Yuri Gagarin? Yep. I'm going to turn it down a little bit for me. There we go. All right, cool. Oh. Okay, so back to square one. All right, so Yuri Gagarin, April 1st, first manned spaceflight from the Soviet Union on the Vostok 1. And then, of course, as we know, in 1969, humanity landed on the moon, if you believe in those sort of things. No. Apollo 11 was the American spaceflight that first landed humans on the moon. Commander Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin landed the Apollo lunar module Eagle on July 20th, 1969. If you believe the feds. So in 2045, and this is where my sort of future timeline starts for Give Them Hope. In 2045, humanity lands on Mars, and I haven't set specific dates, like July 20th or April 1st, what have you. I don't think it's important right now. I think it's more important to just sort of get a loose time frame. Yeah, I bet April Fool's Day is not a thing in Russia. So only 10 years after its creation, the International Space Agency. So in this timeline, the International Space Agency is created 11 years from now in 2035. But the International Space Agency sends the first manned mission to Mars. Japanese astronaut Imai Masuyo takes the first steps on the Red Planet, a live broadcast as witnessed by billions of people. Now, obviously, it's being broadcast live from Mars, and it's not real time here on Earth because of the delay, but it is broadcast live from Mars, those first steps on Mars by Imai Masuyo. And really, this is important because this, along with the creation of the International Space Agency, has really driven humanity to be more curious about space and to be more determined to get out into space, particularly in our solar system. Because as time goes on in this, in this timeline, much like it is right now, resources are becoming more and more scarce. Earth is becoming more crowded. There's more and more conflict going on, and so more level heads are really pushing for the international community to come together and get out into space and develop new technologies to help us be a not planet Earth-bound species and hopefully eventually extrasolar. So in 2055, humanity develops fusion power, finally. Fusion reactors give humanity energy independence and provide necessary power for advanced research and development of additional new technologies, including vastly improved spacecraft thrusters. So the humanity gets to Mars, and obviously, even with what the technologies we have right now, that would be a huge accomplishment. And even 20 years in the future, barring any massive improvements, it would still be a pretty substantial logistical challenge and a long flight. And so this is what drives researchers to work even more on developing fusion power, not only to help alleviate the resource conflicts on here on Earth, but also to give humanity the power to be able to travel at greater speeds and for longer distances out into space. And so scientists develop fusion power. They're finally able to harness it and use that power to not only provide, not unlimited, but pretty much limitless power here on Earth, to really satisfy our needs, but also to provide our spacecraft with the power they need to go farther and faster. But this additional power also gives us opens up a lot of doors in terms of research and development. And where we had previously been constrained by our ability to generate and transmit power, we make a pretty substantial leap with the development of fusion. I need to make sure I set this to... Hopefully that'll repeat the playlist. Okay, so that's page 1. And that gets us up to 2055 in the timeline of Give Them Hope. So 17 years later, in 2072, we developed we start the first permanent Martian colony. And so we'd made multiple expeditions to Mars since 2055. Each with greater success, and taking less time, due to the advent of fusion power, 2045. But now we've developed the logistics and everything necessary to be able to not only send manned missions there, but to send enough resources, manpower, and technology to be able to start developing a colony there, a permanent colony. So a multinational effort under the International Space Agency establishes the first permanent colony on Mars. Additional colonies soon follow, and terraforming research begins. So not only are we able to get enough people there to establish a permanent settlement and sustain that settlement, keep it protected, make it viable, but that having scientists and researchers on Mars, as well as being able to bring the resources we need there, allows us to begin to research terraforming of that planet in earnest, in the hopes of being able to make it habitable versus just having domed colonies there, but eventually have a breathable and sustainable atmosphere capable of supporting Earth-based life. In 2101, so 29 years later, gravity shields are developed. Gravity shields are now able to be utilized as deflectors, allowing for drastically increased speed and safety of space travel in the solar system. So in this timeline, not only have we, I haven't talked about it more, but it's something I could include later. But with fusion power, we are able to develop Vasimir-type thrusters that use magnets and hydrogen or other ionized gases created, turned into plasma to create thrust. And so as fusion power becomes more and more viable and we're able to harness it better, we're able to generate more and more thrust. But the faster you go, the greater difficulty you have with these increased speeds, you really have to be able to protect your spacecraft, as you're traveling at these greater speeds across the solar system. And so with this, with fusion power, we're doing additional work, research, and we're able to use fusion power to now power a gravity shield, which is kind of the premise behind the deflector array in Star Trek. And basically it just protects ships as they're traveling at high speed through space from debris, high speed stellar debris, and just deflects it around your path. And having that protection allows us to go faster and really harness the power of fusion and the power of the thruster technologies that we've developed. So in 2113, so now we are 12 years later, we start to colonize. We start colonization of the outer solar system. So humanity begins to colonize the asteroid belt, starting with Ceres, which is a very large planetoid in the asteroid belt. The Jovian and Galilean moons soon follow. Those are the moons around Jupiter and Saturn. And a lot of those, there's dozens or hundreds of moons around Jupiter and Saturn, and a lot of them are huge. Terraforming efforts have borne fruit. So we're 40 years later, and we have not only started to terraform the planet, but we've successfully terraformed the planet, and it now has a breathable atmosphere and a developing ecosystem. And so we have an atmosphere there. It's breathable. It's not super dense. You still need to wear like an assist device to help with the concentration of oxygen, but there's enough atmospheric pressure there for humans to be able to breathe outside without protection, and as well as there's enough atmospheric protection from harmful solar radiation that you can be outside with limited protection. And humanity is now starting to cultivate flora on the planet in order to help bolster the atmosphere and continue to make life there more viable instead of having to ship in everything from Earth. But of course, all good things must come to an end. So, so I wanted to bring show a little point. So the reason that colonization of the outer system starts to take place 12 years after gravity shields are developed is we develop gravity shields, so now we're able to finally be able to go faster and test more powerful thrusters and engines. But I've got a pretty cool graphic that shows the distances that we're talking about versus going from Earth to Mars to Earth to the outer solar system. Oh, I don't want to open it in Paint. Open with Photos. And so here we can see that from Earth to Mars is 4.35 light minutes. So it takes light 4 1/3 minutes to get from Mars to Earth and vice versa. But to get to Jupiter and Saturn, it takes light almost 35 minutes to get to Jupiter from Earth. So that's 7 times longer. The distances is 7 times greater to get to Jupiter from Earth. So obviously, that's a much bigger logistical hurdle to get to Jupiter and then get to Saturn. And the asteroid belt isn't on this graphic, and I forget where exactly it lies. I'm brain farting on that. I want to say it was somewhere around here. But even with the increased speeds, it's the task of getting from Earth to Jupiter and Earth to Saturn is similar to what it was like getting to Mars the first time. So it's still a big hurdle, but we realize that there's moons out there that we could potentially terraform, and a lot of resources that are available, because we're improving our scanning technology, and so we're continuing to push out further into the solar system in search of resources, in search of land to colonize, as the population on Earth continues to grow. It's spilling over into Mars, it's spilling over into the asteroid belt and on the Jovian and Galilean moons. People are looking for places to go. So I thought that graphic was pretty cool. So 26 years after the beginnings of the colonization of the outer solar system, we have the beginning of the separation, what are called the separation wars. Despite the many successes When I say many successes, the many successes of the International Space Agency and these collaborative efforts between multinational collaborative efforts. Several factions developed that resist the growing movement towards unifying humanity. So we have all this, multinational cooperation, global cooperation to achieve these things that, previously we never thought possible. Getting to Mars and colonizing it and terraforming it, getting to the outer solar system and colonizing, moons and creating asteroid colonies, way out in the asteroid belt. And so there's this. This is fostering a sentiment within humanity, globally, that is really unifying everyone and bringing everyone closer together. And you have all these people from countries all over the place coming together to go out and, make these things happen and to take on the unknown. But there's people back on Earth, and even people in the extra, in across the solar system, who resent this change, and they think that different countries should be leading the way, and they're still very much nationalist. And it's not just one nationalist faction, for South Africa or Australia or something like that. There are multiples, across from different nationalities across Earth. But it's not just Earth. There's also nationalist factions on Mars and at some of the colonies in the outer solar system. People who don't want to be unified, who want to have their own unique identity. Which having a unique identity is fine, but it makes sense, a certain amount of sense, to have a more unified governing body and a more unified sort of presence and set of goals for humanity. So several brief and bloody conflicts occur, but just like with the challenges of getting to Mars and colonizing it and everything that came after, joint operations led by previously rival nations. So you can imagine, leaders reaching across the aisle from Russia and the United States and China, and maybe even North Korea or something like that, reaching across the aisle and saying, "Hey, we need to work together to quell these uprisings, to stop this sentiment, and show that we can work together to move humanity forward, work together for a greater good." And so these joint military operations are able to combat these attacks, and root out these nationalist factions wherever they are, and bring them to justice. And eventually, what are called, they're not really wars, but it's basically a series of terrorist conflicts, a large scale terrorist conflicts that eventually come to a close, as these terrorists are rounded up, and more populist sentiment decries them and says, "We don't want you. We don't want this anymore. We want to move humanity forward." It becomes an overwhelming majority. So, alrighty. And let me know if you're listening and hanging out with me. If you have any questions, if you want me to go over anything further, by all means. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. This is all work in progress, but I've been having a lot of fun writing these things out and fleshing out these ideas that I've had in my head. And if the music is too loud and it makes it difficult for you to hear me, by all means, let me know. Oh, I see. It's adjusting it in my head. There we go. Okay, that's fine. So, in 2142, so the separation wars start in 2139, and they essentially last for about 3 years. And in 2142, humanity finally unites into a single governing body called the Terran Alliance. And so the Terran Alliance is formed. All these governments come together and they say, hey, we need a unifying governing body in order to move us forward. And it essentially becomes a sort of representative democracy, a republic style democracy, with instead of having individual nations and then going up, it's more like you have all these different provinces being represented within this government, and there's provinces on Earth, Mars, out in the colonies, and they all, it's representative based off of, it's sort of like we have here in the U.S. where we have a two-tiered system based off of population, but also, making sure that, Earth doesn't just, overwhelm everybody, because obviously the bulk of the population is still Earthbound. The population on Mars is booming, as well as the outer, the colonies in the outer solar system. But, you still have, probably tens of billions of people on Earth at this point. Sorry, when I say tens of billions, I mean in the tens of billions, 11, 12, 13, not like 20, 30, 40 billion. So, after narrowly avoiding what analysts believe could have been a third world war that spanned the solar system, because that was the worry. These analysts thought that these nationalists were going to gain support with their message, and that it was going to ignite nationalist factions within their home governments and lead to a third world war that wouldn't just be a world war, it'd be a solar war. Solar being solar system. A third world war that spanned the solar system. World leaders established a unified government representing Earth, Mars, and the outer soul colonies. So outer soul colonies being the Jovian and Galilean moons, and the colonies within the asteroid belt, the asteroid colonies. So 8 years later, 2150, faster than light. Advancements in the refinement of rare earth metals found in the asteroid and Kuiper belts led to the development of the Casimir drive. So the Casimir drive is what I'm calling the sort of in-system drive, in-system faster than light drive that ships use in this universe. And Casimir is a name for a part of the theoretical technology of the Alcubierre drive. And I forget which part, but I thought the name Casimir sounded cool. But the way I incorporated the lore into this is that we weren't able to develop this drive. The Alcubierre drive was theoretical until we were able to get out into the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belts and find enough of these rare earth metals, or rare earth metals that aren't in abundance on Earth, in order for us to be able to develop these advanced refining techniques to create these alloys from these rare earth metals that we need to create this drive. And so that was part of the push to get out into the asteroid belt, is to not only find lots of resources, to find these very rare resources that are not found very much in the solar system entirely. And so now that we are having more and more people and out in the outer system and making these trips and ships and everything, there's lots of research and development going on, we're finally able to develop faster than light travel. But lore equals gameplay strikes again. So I didn't want it to be so that, okay, now we have faster than light drive, and it means we can do, 10, 20, 100 times faster than light travel. I wanted the faster than light drive to be able to be, a vast improvement over traditional thrusters like the Vasimir thrusters. in terms of speed, but I wanted it to be limited in terms of acceleration, so that as well as top speed, so that way it's a huge improvement, but it isn't an improvement it isn't a it isn't an exponential improvement, if that makes sense. So we're able to go a lot faster, but it takes a while to accelerate up to our top speed. And we're really, because of our, because of the technology we have in terms of power generation, but also power transmission, we're still limited in that top speed. So operating on similar principles as an Alcubierre drive, but without the use of dark energy, humanity can now sustain efficient space travel at nearly 2 times the speed of light. Pardon me. The limitations are that achieving these speeds requires significant acceleration time. So travel of short stellar distances is only minimally impacted. So we can get up to 2C, but you essentially have a curve. It's like an exponential curve of getting up there. And so it takes you, maybe it takes you, 20, 30 minutes or longer, maybe an hour to reach 2C. And there isn't acceleration with faster than light travel in terms of the theory for the Alcubierre drive, but this is what I'm incorporating in order for gameplay purposes. Because I didn't want you to just all of a sudden be able to charge it and then warp away and you disappear. I wanted you to be able to, accelerate at greater speeds until you sort of, if you're on a game map, you are able to accelerate out towards the outer edge of the map and then, retreat if you're losing a battle or if you don't want to take on a mission or if you're being pursued. But you wouldn't be able to instantly get away. You're just slowly pulling away and more quickly until you reach the outer system. Or you're able to get out of the way and then stop and then, work your way back around, something like that. But I wanted it to be so that way I'm going to pull that image up again. So if we're able to reach 2C, if we're able to instantly reach that speed, going from Earth to Mars would mean we could get there in 2 minutes. But if there's an acceleration time component to it, it means that it's still going to be a little bit of a commute to Mars. And I haven't done the exact math, but I was thinking if I did the exact math, getting from Earth to Mars would be 20 to 30 minutes. And getting to Jupiter from Earth would be in the span of an hour or two, because we're able to accelerate more in that short distance. Getting out to Saturn would be only a couple a little bit over that, 2 to 3 hours. Same with the asteroid belt. And we're able to get out to the much more easily get out to the Kuiper belt and the outer edge of the solar system. But it still takes time. If you're traveling at 2C, you reach full acceleration and it takes you 30 minutes to accelerate. It's still going to take you, nearly 5 hours to get to the inner Kuiper belt, and over 7 hours to get to the outer Kuiper belt. And that's just going one way. So you don't have instant travel. You can't instantly reinforce someone. There's still going to be an economic aspect, but I wanted it to be kind of like basically the like getting around the United States or something like that, where once you get up to cruise altitude, you're flying a lot faster, but you have that acceleration period after takeoff to get up to cruise altitude, and then you're cruising. And that same sort of thing applies here. But now that we're able to go these speeds, it doesn't take you days, or weeks to get out here and make these return trips. So 4 years later, we start an expedition to Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri and Proxima Centauri really are the closest solar system to our own solar system. And so it makes sense that that would be the first solar system that we would target in terms of an extrasolar expedition. And I think, did I save an image for that? I did not save an image for that, and I forget the distance to Alpha Centauri, but I want to say it was still going to be like 2 or 4 years at 2C to get there one way, and that's what I was going for. And so that would still be a significant expedition. Getting to Alpha Centauri would be as challenging with the limited faster than light travel that we have, but it would be still as challenging as our first expedition to Mars. And basically, we're making these leapfrogs, and okay, getting to this point is the same difficulty as getting to that point, and so on. But because the solar system still is rich in resources, and we're terraforming these moons, and the population is still growing on Mars, and we finally have better access to the resources in the Kuiper Belt. A lot of people are like, why are we funding this expedition? We've looked through the telescope, or all of our telescopes and scanners, and there really isn't anything of interest there that we can tell. What's the point of doing this now? It's a hugely expensive expedition to finance, but the did I name it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So the sort of spiritual successor to the International Space Agency is the Terran Exploratory Service. So decried by some as a waste of resources, the Terran Exploratory Service sets out on a multi-year expedition to explore the closest star system to Sol, Alpha Centauri. And when they get there, they find naturally occurring antimatter. And so antimatter is always, I'm not some whiz-bang scientist or anything like that, but antimatter isn't supposed to really be able to occur naturally, because anytime it comes into contact with matter, big bada boom. But it's been theorized that you could create synthetic antimatter and potentially use it as a power source. And so that's the next step for humanity in terms of power generation, and the next big scientific leap is the discovery that antimatter can occur naturally. And the way this turns into gameplay is that an antimatter is the fuel resource that we use in the game as part of the game design. And we are never able to make synthetic creation of antimatter a economically viable venture. We can't just make our own fuel and have an unlimited fuel source. But antimatter, we'll talk more about antimatter here in a second, but it's the next big step from fusion. So it essentially gets us greater power generation. We're using a different source for fuel, but there is still it's still a resource, and it's limited, and it's only found in certain places. So we'll talk more about that in a second. So 2160, obviously, because the expedition to Alpha Centauri and back, I think I estimated would be like 4 years at 2C. I'm forgetting about the math, but basically they get back and confirm all the discoveries, and everybody goes nuts for a year or so. And in 2160, we have the antimatter gold rush. So the discovery of naturally occurring antimatter leads to the development of antimatter reactors. These are quantum leap past fusion reactors, and this fuels a gold rush of government-funded expeditions to obtain more. So in order to not flip up the faster than light technology on its head, because I didn't want to replace it, I wanted it to still be how we get around within the solar system, how we travel around that way. I didn't want antimatter, the discovery of antimatter and antimatter reactors, to change that dynamic. it's going to improve it a little bit, and so we have greater power, but we don't have the ability to channel that into a faster drive, more fuel efficient, but not faster. But so we send government-funded expeditions to Alpha Centauri to harvest this antimatter in the star system. There's a series of them starting in 2160. So we send multiple expeditions out there to go out and bring more antimatter back in order to further develop antimatter reactors and replace fusion as the primary source of power. Obviously, fusion reactors would still be used. They're cheap and efficient and safe, but antimatter energy it provides an even greater power source than fusion. So, first extrasolar colony in 2190. Scientists theorized that somehow gravitational anomalies surrounding the 3 stars of Alpha Centauri are the reason that antimatter is found in seemingly random locations within the system. This is a key point. Found seemingly randomly. This drives the development of the first extrasolar colony on Proxima Centauri b, a subterranean colony for antimatter refinement prior to shipping back to Sol. So the Terran Alliance funds a series of expeditions to bring the resources out to Proxima Centauri in order to set up a colony on Proxima Centauri b, the second planet from the star Proxima Centauri. But because the planet is so close to Proxima Centauri, it's supposed to be just bathed in super dangerous radiation. And so in order to protect it, the colony is subterranean. And they build this colony there in order to be able to more easily and readily harvest the antimatter in the system, but then to refine it for shipping it back to Sol. By refining it, you're able to much more. It makes transport of it much more efficient than transporting unrefined antimatter. And basically you're turning it into the fuel that's needed for antimatter reactors. It's the same thing as right now we ship oil all across the world, and we burn a ton of it just getting it back to where the refineries are, and it's not necessarily the most cost-effective thing. It all started as a fighting hole, but Gunny got pissed. Yeah. So in order to make, because we are still traveling at because we're still only traveling at a little over 2C now. We're able to achieve with antimatter reactors. We're able to achieve a higher top speed, but our ability to create a faster, a greater field differential with the the Casimir drive is limited. Even with the ability to make more power. And so we're able to get up to maybe 2.5, 3, 4C, something like that. But we're still limited by our acceleration, and that's the sort of gameplay mechanic for it. But that's why we established this first extrasolar colony out in Proxima Centauri. But by having this additional power, just like having fusion power and fusion reactors, gave us some of the tools that we needed, along with the rare earth metals and the refinement of those, to achieve this next quantum leap in research and development of technologies. Antimatter reactors drive another boom in scientific research. So the Nexus is discovered in 2219. So 29 years after the first extrasolar colony is established. So the power derived from antimatter reactors drives a boom in scientific research, leading to the discovery of and ultimately accessing of higher space-time, which scientists dub the Nexus. And so this is the name I have given to the warp. in this universe. Pardon me, I need to take a drink of water. So, using the power generated from antimatter reactors, scientists are able to, tear open the fabric of space-time to gain access to a sort of a higher dimension, higher space-time that the scientists call this region, this place, the Nexus. But once they access it, they're like, okay, cool. Now what do we do? And there isn't, we open this this portal into higher space time, and all these demons came, spiraling through. That's not. This isn't sci fantasy. This is more of a more sort of hard sci-fi kind of. Because as it starts out, it's more, the universe as it starts out is much more expanse-like, and then going forward becomes more and more higher science fiction, but not sci-fantasy at all. So yeah, scientists, access the Nexus, and they're like, okay, cool. Well, let's keep doing experiments and see, does this go anywhere? What can we do with it? Are there resources here? So 2228, so 9 years later. While increases in the speed of space travel are minimal even with the use of antimatter reactors, researchers discover that ships equipped with sufficient power capacity and a device dubbed the Nexus Drive are able to not only access the Nexus, but traverse it to reach distant star systems. So a series of experiments, scientists are able to open up this access to the Nexus, and at first they do it with fixed facilities out in the extrasolar system because they're worried about, well, what if it blows up, but they get it refined down to the point where, okay, we can put this on a ship. Okay, well, if we put it on a ship, what can we do? And they realize that you can, once you get into the Nexus, they're able to use improved scanning technologies, and they're able to see that if you open up the Nexus, if you use the drive, you not only can open up the Nexus at one point, but also at another point. The only thing is the 2 points are not right next to each other. It isn't a insta portal that gets you there. It's this higher space time basically shrinks the connection between point to point travel on the Nexus. So essentially we have taken what we had before with faster than light travel, and it takes us hours to reach the outer solar system. Now we have the Nexus Drive, and once we figured out that you can create a point-to-point opening between where you are and another solar system, you can enter the Nexus and sort of follow that sort of almost tunnel through the Nexus to that other point. But because your ship has to you go in, you open this tunnel and you go in, and the tunnel closes behind you, but you have to keep the tunnel open as you fly through it until you come out the other end and it closes behind you. And so it requires constant power generation. And so it's a big drain in use of antimatter because of how this works. But that's why another gameplay lore equals gameplay thing, in that we don't have unlimited faster than light travel. You still use antimatter to generate the power to use this. You don't have unlimited Nexus Drive capacity. You can only generate so much power. So your point to point portal or tunnel that you and what I end up calling the Nexus Bridge. We'll read more about in a second. But your point to point bridge can only be so far. You can only extend that bridge so far, and the greater the amount of mass that's within the bridge as it's traveling through it, the more power you have to generate in order to keep it open. And so in order to open it up in the first place, you need a large device with a significant power supply. So basically a capital ship. And not just like capital ships like in Star Citizen where everything down to a Corvette is a capital ship. We're talking battleships, carriers, these super freighters and such, all really big ships with, large antimatter reactors or multiple antimatter reactors in order to open up access to the Nexus, but also to generate a bridge and to generate a bridge as far as it will go. So 2 years later, after we have discovered that we can reach distant star systems with it, we start the expedition to New Atlantis. So in 2230. So after 2 years of tests that included the loss of 2 experimental AI-controlled ships, human scientists perfect the method for targeting the endpoint of a Nexus bridge. So the problem was we were struggling to be able to, get proper site alignment, site picture on the exit point. And so we kept on opening up these Nexus bridges to empty space out in the middle of nowhere. And we knew that we could travel really far because these AI ships, when they did return, were able to say, hey, I was able to look at the stars and see where I was, and I didn't land where we wanted to, but I knew that I was way out here, but our aim was off. So we're able to finally, with fine-tuning, we perfect the method of targeting the endpoint of a Nexus bridge, which must be minutely calculated upon opening up the portal to the Nexus from real space. The target is a system with what is believed to be a habitable water planet. I just want to check in with everybody again, make sure that the audio is still good, that the music isn't too loud, but I wanted to have a little bit of a soundtrack background to my voice speaking about this. But yeah, so we send out deep space scans, and we're looking through these hyper powerful scanners and telescopes okay, good, thank you, Danger Hobo, to look for systems that would be worth sending an expedition to. We're looking for systems that show signs of resources, that show signs of planets that are potentially habitable. But the closest one that we find is a system with a water planet that's believed to be habitable. With an atmosphere that is either habitable or amenable to terraforming, and decent gravity and such. And so we send this expedition to New Atlantis. And like I was talking about, when you enter the Nexus Bridge, it isn't like the game Portal or some other sci-fi where you instantly are transported, go through the gate and you come out on the other side instantly. The longer this Nexus Bridge, the longer it takes to traverse it. And so we're talking, the shorter trips to this, these closer systems would take a matter of hours. But the way I'm theorizing it is the farthest we could go would be a trip of a couple days to reach these farther solar systems. And we're not talking about crossing the galaxy. We're talking about being able to cross tens to even low hundreds of light years to sort of leapfrog to additional star systems. So that was in 2230, the expedition to New Atlantis. So in 2236, New Atlantis is terraformed. Though extrasolar travel is costly in terms of antimatter, the discovery of a planet that required minimal terraforming to be colonized is deemed worthwhile. The surface of New Atlantis is speckled with islands, and there is even diverse undersea life that is unaffected by the minimal terraforming process. Colonization begins in earnest. So there is undersea life on New Atlantis. There's not intelligent or sapient life there, but the planet requires minimal terraforming. It's basically just an adjustment in the concentrations of oxygen and gas densities to make it comfortable for humans to breathe, but it doesn't really have any effect on on the oceans and the sea life there. But it's covered with all these little islands and archipelagos. So there's enough landmass there that we are able to build small cities and colonies, as well as underwater colonies. And so we start to terraform it, and it's our first extrasolar colony. So now this is costly because we're still working on perfecting this technology, and making these big jumps, does require, you have to generate a lot of power in order to do this, and that consumes antimatter, and so it's not free, because we aren't able to make antimatter in commercially viable quantities. So we have to find it within solar systems, and so far the only place we've found it is in Alpha Centauri, and thankfully there's quite a bit, but it's the way I anticipate it is that I'll talk more about it later, but basically antimatter is formed. We don't know how it gets into these star systems, but it comes from it comes from the nexus, and somehow it is able to traverse from the nexus to real space, but we don't know why it is able to do that, and we don't know how, and we aren't able to say, oh, it's due to these stellar phenomena, and so we just need to look for these types of systems. So eventually we find out that it just appears randomly. We don't understand the conditions that cause it to form, but basically it will find a little sort of pocket that it likes, and it will appear up to a certain point, and then it will stop appearing there. It sort of achieves a sort of equilibrium. And so we can harvest it, and after we harvest it, it drops down, and then it slowly starts to build back up again. And so if we consume too much, it's a resource, but if you consume it too quickly, it will drop down to zero, and then it's sort of the refresh rate is really slow. And so we have to be careful on how much we use. It's expensive to harvest, and it's nearly a finite resource until we find more systems that have it naturally occurring. Yeah, Ghost 1800. Well, there's your problem. You need to get some E710. And if you're not familiar with what E710 is, it's the resource, the sort of oil that the Terminids, their decomposing corpses generate from Helldivers 2. Yeah, we need some E710 in this universe, and we need to go harvest it for democracy. Liberty demands fuel. So, after terraforming New Atlantis, and we have more and more people moving there, and more ships traversing the Nexus to this extrasolar colony, this essentially drives the next major leap in expansion for humanity. Because not only are we looking to spread out from our solar system and explore and find new homes for humanity, but we also need more resources. Of course, we always need more resources. And because we need antimatter for the Nexus drives and to power our ships when they're using their Casimir drives in system, but we also need these rare earth metals and minerals that are only found in small quantities in certain systems to be able to build these antimatter reactors, the Nexus drives, the Casimir drives, all the things that we need to traverse the solar systems and travel between star systems. So in 2240, from 2240 to 2314, we have what's called the Great Proliferation. Yeah, we need peanut butter for the chow hall. We need to find naturally occurring jalapeno cheese spread. I need it to be coming up, bubbling out of the ground, where we can make a well to pump it out of. that shit's a delicacy, man. Yeah. So the Great Proliferation from 2240 to 2314, in search of habitable planets, because we do have some ability to terraform and generate an atmosphere that is both protective as well as breathable. It's limited, and so we have to find planets that are within the sort of green band, but also are amenable to our limited terraforming technologies. A reliable source of country captain chicken. Yeah. So, in search of habitable planets, naturally occurring antimatter, because we talked about how it only, we basically have to scan and explore these systems in detail to see, okay, is there any antimatter here? No? Okay, well, moving on to the next system. And so there's these expeditions that are going all over the place looking for star systems with antimatter, but we don't have clues as to where it would pop up. And so we can only send out so many expeditions. Basically, the Terran Exploratory Service is sort of like on a limited budget when it comes to exploratory missions, because we have to sort of ration our supplies of antimatter, and we can only build so many ships that are capable of doing these things, because we're limited on the resources that we have to do it until we find additional systems. And so, it's, during this period, it isn't just, just a giant shotgun spread out into space. It's a sort of calculated, okay, there's a cluster of star systems that are close together over here. And so we're going to send an expedition via Nexus Bridge over to these star systems, and they can sort of explore this sort of cluster over here, these stellar clusters, in order to, that's their whole, the Terran Exploratory Service is basically tasked with planning and organizing these expeditions with the resources available to them. But so they have success over time, and we find more star systems that have habitable planets, as well as star systems that have these ultra valuable resources that we need. So the Terran Alliance sponsors a substantial, albeit strictly controlled, program of exploration and expansion. Due to the relative scarcity of antimatter and maintenance needs of Nexus drives, extrasolar travel is heavily regulated. New colonies are formed, and multiple other systems are discovered with deposits of naturally occurring antimatter, as well as valuable metals and minerals. And so this is the lore equals gameplay aspect of where this all comes in. And I haven't figured out which metals and minerals I want to use alongside antimatter, but basically, in order to maintain your ship, your hero ship and its escorts during the campaign, you're going to need to have these resources. And so you'll need to have these resources to do repairs to to your ship, because your drives and your reactors and such will take damage, along with the sort of like base metals in order to do structural repairs. But you're also going to need these resources in order to do the upgrades that you'll only be able to do at certain space stations with a dry dock, essentially, capable of taking on a capital ship or a super capital. And so that's part of the gameplay, is that these systems, you have to go out and do missions for them in order to gain their favor, for them to sort of give you a tithe of the resources available in their system. And basically they'll say, hey, we're not going to give you any of our antimatter. We need this for ourselves right now. But if you do this for us, we'll give you a portion of our antimatter harvest, or whatever word you want to use, to sustain your operations. And antimatter and trinium, we can make stuff up, or we could use some actual scientific thing, but basically a handful of resources, of a handful of scarce resources, and then more prolific general resources that you need for your structural repairs, and sustaining your operations. You'll need antimatter you'll need these rare earth metals. Maybe I just say rare earth metals, and it's a conglomerate, or maybe I pick 2 or 3. But then you'll also need food. You'll need munitions. You'll need a resource in terms of medicine to be able to heal your troops. Multiple resources that you have to keep coming in order to, not fund, but sustain your operations to continue to go and help additional star systems to progress with the campaign. Because not only will some of these systems will give you resources for helping them out, and other ones have standing military units that they will commit to either they will a very small handful of them will commit them to you, and then you can control them. Additional ships to add to your pool of escorts, but also additional ground units. But then other ones will say, okay, well, this major colony here is the home base of Third Fleet, or the 24th Battle Group or something like that. And if you win their alignment and you sustain their alignment, they will join you at the final battle to retake the Sol system from the aliens that have conquered it. Heal everything with Motrin and hydration. Yes, we need to make sure we have a steady supply of fresh, clean socks, because we don't want our Marines getting blisters and trench foot. So, the Great Proliferation continues until about 2314. And at this point, I haven't made space trench foot. Ooh, I don't know if you just heard that. That was my shoulders popping. But basically, at this point, the expansion has started to slow down because we have colonized enough habitable systems that we really don't need to have more space, and we've got a good supply of resources coming in, and so the demand for resources in space has sort of tapered off, and we're sending fewer and fewer expeditions out. And I'm not going to lock in at where how many systems we have at this point, but basically I eventually want to make the star map, make an actual art star map with Mustang 6, my artist, and we will basically map out which colony, which systems are full-fledged represented colonies within the Alliance of Terran Systems, and which systems are what we call the outer colonies, which is where there's mining and other small colonies, but they're not sufficient to be represented within the government. They're small, and they're not on essentially what are the space lanes. Oh, that's another thing I need to add in here. So not only do we have the Nexus Bridge, which is a drive on ships, but eventually we develop what's called the Nexus Bridge Network, NBN. And basically we build gates that allow for smaller ships to traverse the nexus in between systems from gate to gate. And basically the gates will, and it doesn't allow you to, use this gate to dial this gate over here. It basically creates a sort of highway system. It isn't Stargate in that you put in the coordinates for any gate you want, but just the next nearest one, or they're tied together. Just like the Nexus Bridge drive allows you to open from here to here, the Nexus Bridge network allows you to go from these set 2 gates. And so a system might have multiple gates in it going to different direction, to different neighboring star systems. But obviously they uses the same technology and same, uses antimatter as the Nexus Bridge drive. And so these gates are very expensive to build, but they are more efficient in terms of usage than ships. You don't because you're only having to open up a Nexus Bridge for the size of ship or ships going through there, and so it's more cost effective for space travel that way than sending these big ships and opening these great big bridges. You can send a whole bunch more smaller bridges going back and forth, but it's more cost effective that way. And so basically it's like the highway system or like a railroad network between the major Earth, the solar system, and the major colonies, or what are called the old colonies, the more established ones from the Great Proliferation. Because after the Great Proliferation, humanity sort of slows down in its expansion and is finding fewer habitable star systems that are within sort of easy, reasonable reach. And we're still filling up these planets and systems, and so we really don't need as much space. It's not as cost effective to continue to expand. So 2326, basically 12 years after the sort of decline of the Great Proliferation, we are not alone. So first contact. As the breadth of the Terran Alliance expands, humanity inadvertently bumps into other intelligent life in the form of the Unkasi, or Unkazi. I think I'm going to go with Unkazi. A highly intelligent, albeit methodical, spacefaring species. So they are not rash in their decision making. They are very slow. They're kind of slow to react. They don't. They're not impulsive like humanity is. The Nkasi are a physically intimidating but non-aggressive species. So non-aggressive in that they are not aggressive. They are not outwardly aggressive, but they are very protective of their own, and because of their herd mentality from what they evolved from. So a gregarious, which is another word for saying a species that lives within herds or pods or flocks, whatever. A gregarious, good-natured, and long-lived people, they quickly, for them, adopt a series of mutually beneficial treaties and then inform humanity of a threat. So our initial impression of them is like, oh, they are really friendly. They don't talk fast, but they're good-natured. Think of it kind of like if you've watched... Oh, sorry, itch. If you've watched Kung Fu Panda, think of Kung Fu Panda's dad, the turtle. Now, they're not like a reptilian turtle-like species. I was thinking they would be sort of their stature, they're bipedal now, but they would sort of be very large and thick, tough hide, share some similarities with like rhinoceroses, but not like these big old hoof feet, and no horned thing. But if you think of what their skin is like and their body composition, they're very big, hardy creatures, and they don't move fast, and but they are protective within herds. And I'm gonna write the passage for them before I do the next episode of this series. But so we instantly start to trust them, and we're like, oh yeah, we love they're traders. They're technologically advanced, and that they are at a similar technological level with humanity. Now they've discovered antimatter as well. They've been spacefaring for longer than humanity, but because they are slow to react and they're methodical, they haven't been their region of space isn't as big as humanity's. They haven't expanded as much, because they're not really aggressive in anything except for when they sort of circle the wagons. The herd comes together for their own protection, and that's sort of how they survived. And I'll talk more about this when I write about them. But basically, they were a herd species, a prey species on their home planet, and they started to develop tools and shelter because they recognized Yeah, and they've kept this history. They're shamans. They're wise people were able to recognize that there was going to be a great calamity because they recognized changes in the weather patterns, and so they developed tools. They developed shelters, and they were able to uh, start to preserve food and grow their own food, and so that they are able to build these massive shelters that not only protected them from the predators, which were really voracious, dangerous predators, but they also allowed them to survive this great natural disaster that befell their planet. And it was almost an extinction level event, but they were able to weather this, weather the storm, so to speak. And that's essentially what it will be, like an ice age, where their predators were not, and they came out on top. And their home planet was changed drastically after that, but they survived, and that is what spurred them on to become, to develop greater tools, greater technologies, and really advance their society. But yeah, so we instantly trust them because of their nature. And after we sign all these treaties, then they come forth and they basically say to humanity's leadership, listen, we did not mean or want to deceive you or anything like that, but we have to warn you. We signed these treaties partly in our own interest because we need help defending ourselves. Because they have recently started to come under attack from the alien antagonists. And the attacks are limited, and they're in their sort of more of a distant corner of their space. But because of where it is, they are concerned that humanity is more exposed. And so they sign these non-aggression and mutual defense pacts because they need help defending themselves, because they're not an aggressive species. They can defend themselves, but they're slow and methodical, and so they aren't good at reacting quickly to these attacks and being proactive in terms of defending themselves. And so they want to work with humanity to protect each other, with technology sharing, resource sharing and trade, but also mutual defense. But it's only after these treaties that they say, yeah, so we're not the only ones out there. And not only are we not the only ones out there in terms of this alien antagonist that has been attacking us, starting to attack us recently, but there's another species. So 2328, 2 years later, so we've been having this dialogue. We've been sending envoys back and forth, and they tell us, after these agreements are signed and we start to trade with them, and our scientists meet together and we start to develop mutual defense plans, they tell us about not only the alien antagonist, but another species that they have run into. And really, this other species is more the other end of humanity's expansion. We've more sort of expanded out in sort of a fan, a little bit like a light or thin fan shape, just because of how close star systems are. Instead of going sort of like to what would be sort of stellar east, we've gone more west by northwest, because it turns out that this. The Unkasi are sort of more to our south, and this other species that the Unkasi have met, not the alien antagonist ones, they're more to our east by southeast, and so they're farther away from us in terms of stellar distances. But even though we're neighbors on the map, but it's a big gap. But we do sort of. Our space sort of butts up against their space, but we didn't realize it because we really hadn't gone out in that direction, and they hadn't come out in our direction because it's such a big leap. So 2328, more stellar neighbors. The Unkasi introduce humanity to another intelligent and spacefaring species. The Mulveen are allies of the Unkasi, although the relationship seems one-sided. The Mulveen are slight of build and of smaller stature than humans, and are evolved from underground dwelling creatures with large family units. And so the Mulveen, yeah, they have sort of rodent-like tendencies, but they don't look strictly like rodents. But they are smaller of build. They are sort of mammalian looking. After meeting the Unkasi, the Mulveen seem cold and disinterested by comparison. Thankfully, they too are non-aggressive, but trade negotiations stall, and they only agree to a limited mutual defense accord. So basically, they don't really have much interest in trading with us. The trade agreements that we establish are very limited. They think that they don't have much to gain from working with us. And and they really don't have much need of defense alongside us, and they don't share much information compared with the Unkasi. So we know that they exist. They're the Unkasi sort of dominate the sort of space to our south, the majority of it, and then to our southeast is where you have the Mulveen, and they are basically the southeast of us, and then down and kind of around the base of Unkasi space. But and then our space, it sort of runs almost parallel to the Unkasi, but theirs comes up this way a little bit, and sort of this region is where the Unkasi have been getting attacked by this alien antagonist species. So that's 2328. And like I said before, this timeline takes us out to the late 2400s. But I haven't quite finished the timeline yet, so we're going to get pretty close, though. And so these last two entries are as far as I've gotten. So we're almost done here. So 2347. So it's 21 years after meeting the Unkasi, and 19 years after meeting the Mulveen. 2347, the threat appears. After being warned by the Unkasi of their existence, Terran government and military leaders make strategic defense plans and expand the army and navy. I need to change that to secret strategic defense plans and expand the army and navy over the next 20 years to prepare for an attack by the insert species name here. I still haven't come up with the name for this alien antagonist species. If you have ideas or suggestions for the name, I would love to hear them. If you're watching now live with me on Twitch, or if you're watching later on YouTube, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Before you give any suggestions, I would just ask that you go back and watch episode 2 where I talk about them. And if you don't want to take the time to watch it because it is kind of long, you can look at the document that's pinned in my Discord, and I'll put it in the description, put the link in the description below if you're watching later on YouTube, and you can see the description of the species in the sort of source document that I'm working on. I'm not going to talk about them in detail right now, but read that, tell me what you think. If you have any suggestions on that, I'd love to hear that as well. But I want to come up with a suitable name to go with them. So attempts to make contact or discover where they come from are unsuccessful. So we've sent expeditions out in the sort of general direction the Unkasi think they're coming from, but we haven't been able to find anything. And we've sent out deep space communications, hoping that they'll reply. No response. And the Unkasi have very limited information other than the brief scans that they've gotten when they've been attacked, and limited recordings from attacked colonies that tell us a little bit about the species, but not much about them. Finally, in 2347, a small mining colony in the system of, pardon me, hiccup. I need to drink some water. Finally, a small mining colony in the system of Daleko is attacked. The miners and their security forces put up fierce but futile resistance, and nearly 3,000 humans are taken as slaves. And that's why So the Terran government didn't want knowledge of this aggressive and aggressive species to get out, because they didn't want to panic the populace. So, oh no, the government is keeping secrets from us again in order, because they think that we can't handle it. Gee, where does this come from? Why would they do such a thing? They would never do that. So they've been keeping it a secret, but they've been developing these strategic plans in concert with the Unkazi in secret, as well as slowly and gradually expanding the military, as you know, in order to hopefully not gain too much attention, but to be better prepared, because I think that an attack can come at any time. But the Nkasi have only been attacked several times over a period of a couple decades, a couple decades, like 20 years. They like 7, 8, 9 attacks. So it's been pretty infrequent. But each time the Nkasi have been attacked, the people, the colonists that were attacked, were subdued and taken prisoner. The attackers took resources. They have taken star systems and fought back any counterattack. But they have taken all of the colonists and as well as military forces, and taken them prisoner. And as far as the Nkasi can tell, those prisoners are used as slaves. And so that's something that they tell us about. But the Terran government doesn't want humanity to be afraid, to just go nuts with fear of being attacked, but also fear of being enslaved by this apparently pretty powerful alien antagonist species. So 15 years later, over the next 15 years, we more raids occur, and the attack on Deleko is covered up by the Terran government. They cover up all word of it. They hush, put a gag order on it, and basically any word of it is strictly suppressed. And so they send out Navy patrols, to try and into sort of outer colonies to try and keep an eye on them better, to try and prevent another attack. And they continue to try and probe farther solar systems, in hope of discovering where they're coming from, but with no success. But so the conflict begins. It really begins in earnest in 2352. After Deleko, several more small-scale raids occur on lightly defended outlying colonies. So basically, solar systems, they don't have habitable planets. Planets can be terraformed. There's resources there, so there are people there, living in space stations and asteroid colonies, lunar colonies, for the purpose of harvesting resources, but not big permanent populations. So really, we think that this is more a war of resources at this point, and the slaves are sort of like a cherry on top for this other species. At least that's what we think. Alliance attempts to keep the attacks a secret rapidly fall apart. So in this intervening period, as more and more attacks happen, and ships escape, with people who have witnessed the attack, and word spreads, and you can't, we can't let these aliens probe us. Yeah, exactly. And so the Alliance tries to keep it under wraps, but ultimately, as more attacks happen, it's too much for them to contain. Alliance attempts to keep the attacks a secret rapidly fall apart as numerous civilian entities pick up on distress calls, which propagate across Alliance space. Then, the insert species name here attack the planet of Reykjavik, a small Navy flotilla in orbit. So there we had Navy ships in orbit of the planet at this time in this colony. They just happen to be there, wrong place, right time. What major secret leaks immediately? Never. Yeah. A small Navy flotilla in orbit puts up a fierce fight, but is quickly overwhelmed, with only the corvette Amsterdam escaping capture. A Navy task force returns within a week to retake the system, with Army troop ships following close behind. But the task force is repulsed with heavy losses as additional enemy ships had arrived to reinforce the initial attackers. The system is declared lost, along with nearly 30,000 innocent civilians. So this is what breaks it wide open. Not only are we, is humanity aware that we have been getting attacked, and that the government's been trying to cover it up, and that multiple colonies, mining and other types of colonies like that, resource generating colonies in the outer systems are attacked, and thousands of humans have been taken prisoner. But now the aliens attack a pretty significant population center. Now, this isn't a system that has that is what's considered one of the old colonies, where you've got populations in the millions, or even millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Maybe at this point there's even an older colony with a population in the billions at this point. But this is Reykjavik is the most recent planet to be discovered that is nearly habitable and requires some terraforming. But basically, this attack happens within about 10 years, 5 to 10 years of the planet being deemed habitable. Terraforming is complete, and it's the sort of next plan to be major colony for the Terran Alliance. And so that's why this is a big deal, because we've expanded this far out here. This is the the most recent colony to planet to be terraformed and colonized, and the first one in a while. And these aliens attack it when it's in its infancy, but there's still 30,000 people there. And not only are 30,000 people captured, but numerous ships are lost, and members of the military are captured. The counterattack is thwarted, and we have to abandon the system to these attackers. And so it's on like Donkey Kong at this point. And so this is the first military engagement we have with the species. Prior to this, they'd only engaged with civilian transports, which are really lightly armed. There are pirates in this universe; they do exist, and they operate, converted civilian freighters and other types of ships, and older military ships that they can get their hands on. But this is the first time the Navy and the military has come up against them. And they are an advanced species technologically. And so this is as far as I've gotten on the timeline. I have to make some more entries. Going forward, we're going to talk about how actually, we'll keep talking about this for a minute. But so this species is advanced. Their ships aren't overwhelmingly powerful, but they have shields. And up to this point, our ships only have deflector shields for stellar debris. And so these deflector shields really don't do anything against weapons. And so our ships are armored, and that's what we have for protection. And our alliance with the Unkasi has really advanced our ability for creating really dense, lightweight, durable alloys. And this is considered the saving grace, that our ships are upgraded over the 20 years from when we first meet the Unkasi, that we rapidly upgrade the armor on our ships based off of what the Unkasi know about the weapons that these enemies use, and the intel that they've gathered. But we don't have shields, and so going forward, we're going to these next few entry like this. I think this next entry is going to be the one where we talk about the alliance, the formation of the Alliance of Terran Systems. Because prior to this point, we just have the Terran Alliance, and really, the systems don't have their own self-governance. There's just the central government back in Seoul, and the systems have like sort of provincial representation, sort of like um, you know senators and stuff like that, but they don't have their own self-governance within their systems, and so they want to have more autonomy and more ability to exercise their influence, because these systems that are further, Earth is basically on the opposite side of where this conflict is starting, or at least where we think it is. And so Earth is farther away, and all these other colonies think that we're shipping too many resources back to Earth, and even especially to the older colonies, and so they want more representation. They want more determination in terms of their defense and where these resources get spent, because they think that Earth is prioritizing itself and isn't giving enough prioritization to developing and protecting the outer colonies and even the old colonies. Yeah, maybe we should cover the ship in WTR weapon grease. Yeah, that way their lasers just sort of glide right off. But so yeah, this is going to lead to the formation of the Terrans of the Alliance of Terran Systems. So that way it becomes more of a human federation, in that these established colonies essentially have more equal representation within the alliance, alongside Earth and Mars. So we have to talk about that. We also have to talk about how the secret operation to capture one of these alien ships, we bait them into an attack, and we're able to disable one of their ships before it can retreat, and we take that ship and we are able to analyze it alongside our Unkasi allies in order to develop shield tech. And so ultimately we are able to develop shield tech in order to give us a more equal footing in this war, because prior to this, even though we've got really resilient armor, this enemy faction has shields. Their armor isn't as good as ours, but we have to get through their shields, and their shields are robust. And so basically we are able to we recognize that we have to level the playing field, and so we discover what they use for shield tech, and we're able to modify it with our own technology to give us our own shields, which I've talked about previously. It's called the amalgam shield, which is basically a combination of a gravity shield. It's the combination of technologies between the gravity shield tech and a plasma based shield, in order to stop not only hardened projectiles and but also energy weapons, and that sort of changes the face of warfare. And then we have to talk more about the relationship between the outer colonies and these ongoing conflicts, and that'll bring us up to the current point where finally there's been enough attacks and enough losses. Basically every few years a major attack happens, and we keep on losing. We aren't able to sustain this, and so finally we convince the Unkasi and the Mulveen, who start to come under attack as well, even though they're on the opposite side. We convince the Mulveen to join with us, and we have at the current day we are gathering a pretty massive attack fleet that's going to go out, because we still haven't been able to locate exactly where their systems are. We just know that they assumedly come from this sort of general direction, but we haven't been able to. We've never been able to go back and locate one of their systems and send a counterattack. And so we're going to send out this big expeditionary attack fleet, a joint fleet between humanity, the Unkasi and the Mulveen, to take the fight to the enemy and to push them back and to try and recover or recapture these handful of human systems that we've lost. You got to send the recon bubbles out to find them. Yeah. But that's where the timeline leaves off when we get to the prologue, which is what I've been working on writing and where the sort of game starts. So yeah, I've got probably another 2 more pages after this one. So essentially it'll be another 8 to 10 entries to make to sort of get us caught up to the current state of the universe. But this is where we're at. And I hope you've found this interesting and enjoyable. I hope you like the music. I'm going to start playing the music, the soundtrack in the background from now on to sort of break up the pauses in my speech and have a little bit of background music. But I will continue to write this, and I'll get it. I wanted to have it finished today. I just didn't have enough time to get it all done while my son was napping. I had to take care of a few other things. But yeah, I'm going to continue to get this fleshed out. And so if you want to see where the rest of this goes, the link to this will be in my Discord in the game dev section. It will also be in the description below if you're watching later on YouTube, and so you can check it out and see where I've added things. If you have suggestions, if you have feedback, if you have questions, I want to hear them. But yeah, this has been really fun for me, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. But I'm going to call it a night because I gotta wake up and be a dad again tomorrow, bright and early. So I hope you guys all have a good night, and I will talk to you later. 07. Cheers.